All right, I'm just gonna fix some audio levels here as we move on to the talking portion of this podcast. All right, hello everyone, welcome to the Mafia Championship podcast, the podcast dedicated to the best and most fun championship in the entire world, where people lie, manipulate, and kill each other. What's not to like? But it's also a tournament where legends are made, new memes are born, and new relationships formed. And it certainly occurred in this game as well. I am your host. I am Mr. Thingyman, the founder of Mafia Championship and Mafia Universe. Once again, we have some awesome guests with us here today. And this time, we will be talking about, you guessed it, Game 5. The only game so far to go the distance, or at least almost go the distance, as the game ended in a Final Four Milo situation, with the win going to the Mafia in the end. A.S. Miller, aka Adrian Miller, was the final mis-elimination of the game, and Pragmatic was the surviving Mafia member, taking it home for the Mafia. And let me just go ahead and get this. You can see the awesome, epic lineup of awesome folks here. One of which, as you may have noticed, is Lissa, one of the moderators and the main organizer of this season of the Mafia Championship. And she is also the one receiving the post-game votes every time. So she has the goods for us, the goods that we're all waiting to see. Will there be a slow roll? Will there not be a slow roll? I don't know. Maybe she prepares something this time. That's exciting to see. So for only the second time, we'll be revealing the game post results live here on the podcast right after this. First, I have a quote from TK, one of the town members in the game, who was also invited to appear in this podcast. He unfortunately had to decline, and he wanted me to pass a message on, so I'm just going to read that up. Tell them I didn't dare to show up after my hard pushing on the spec chat favorite Relm when she's actually here. I am kidding. I just didn't want to cry live if I missed the semifinals. Or just tell them I didn't have time. Well, I read the whole thing. So I know a lot of you want to see TK, so it's good that we at least have a little quote from him. We also have a quote, actually, from Okusan. He says, "Koo!" Yeah, so that's what he had to add. All right, guys, you can unmute yourselves and say hi.
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 Hello, everyone.
Hi.
All right, so it's good to see you all. This is the biggest podcast we've had yet, and it's very exciting. We have Lissa with us here. I know someone may have to leave during the podcast. That's okay. If you have to leave, you just leave. To the Twitch chat, and I see there's a lot of people following there. I can see we are already over 40 people following. That's very exciting. Feel free to ask these players questions in the chat, and I will try to pick them up and ask them on your behalf. We will move on to the introductions, but first, let's start with what everyone's waiting for. Lissa, the results of Game 5.
Okay.
The top 4.
Yes, top 4. So 11 people received votes this game. I did get votes from everyone for this game.
There's a bit of static on the line. I don't know if...
Let me switch mics. Oh, wait, whatever. Is it... How bad is it?
I don't know. If you try not moving. Let's try not moving, and then you can talk.
Does this work?
Yeah, much better. Much
My
better.
microphone is having problems, but I figured they weren't happening today since you didn't point them out in the last 20 minutes. Okay, onward. I'm just going to have to sit very still, I guess.
Yeah.
The top scorer in this game got 43 points. Then 2 people got 30. One got 24.
Okay, actually, listen. There's a lot of static. I don't know if
switch mics. I will just switch mics. Okay.
Yeah, we'll allow you to switch mics.
Switch devices. Actually, this is probably gonna be.
This is of course part of the slow roll. I'm sorry, guys.
This is the slow roll. Yeah.
Yeah.
Part of the slow roll.
Yeah.
Sorry, I thought this would. I knew I was having this issue, but I thought it would be noticeable beforehand.
Anyway. If you need more time, we can have people introduce themselves. Okay.
You can have people introduce themselves.
All right, sure. So you can I don't know, mute yourself while you fix it, so we don't have the static sound.
I'm just gonna have both. I'm gonna be here in multiple devices. I'm just gonna mute this one, and then you're gonna have to let me in on the phone.
Oh.
I don't have another computer mic.
Oh.
I have video disabled on that, so you should probably give it a hiding or something. I don't know. This is really the only solution I have.
No, let's try doing the real and without you moving. It's just sometimes there's a lot of static. But right now, if I think when you talk, yeah. there's static.
Okay, I can try without the changing. Okay. I don't know why it's doing
I'm sorry. Oh, okay. No, there's a lot of static. Sorry for the technical difficulties. It's very staticky. I don't.
Did it cause problems to let the other device in that I can use the mic on? I mean, I can switch entirely. It's just an awkward angle.
I don't know. Yeah. Just try switching.
Okay. You have to let me into the meeting.
Yeah.
I have
And then I'm gonna mute on this one.
Yeah, I'm gonna mute this. Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
Hopefully this is better.
This is better.
All right, onward. Anyway, the first place in this game has 43 votes. Then 2 people have 30 votes. Then there's someone with 24 points. And 19, 2 15s, 2 12s, 8, and 2. And that's a total of 11 people who have gotten at least 1 vote. 7 different people got at least 1 first place vote.
That's a lot. That's a lot. 7 people.
It's fairly high. Yeah. So in 4th place with 24 points is Violet.
Woo! Congrats.
Thank you.
So if you may have noticed, there is a 5 per second. So I've used the tiebreaker, which involves me basically hiding all of the other names on the votes, and I just take the first name that appears in each ballot. And I just count how many ones appear first in each ballot, basically. So first, losing the tiebreak with 30 points in 3rd place is TK5141.
Oh, maybe he's happy he's not here then. This is what he feared. Oh no.
Oh.
But that's a good placing. That's something to be proud of.
And winning this tiebreaker from 2nd place and advancing to the semifinals, also with 30 points, is Capage.
Is who? Sorry.
What?
Did you say who? Oh yeah, it's because
Capage.
you're pronouncing that differently than I do.
Am I pronouncing it wrong?
Capage, I think.
I think it's Cabbage because his name is Cap H on his home side, so I would assume it's Cabbage or Cabbage.
Okay, Capage. Then that's gonna be some adjusting in my head. And then in 1st place, also advancing to the semifinals with 43 points, is Relm.
Realm for the realm.
For the realm.
Oh, it happened for the realm. Oh, I think SpecChat is very happy about that.
That definitely played a role.
You sure SpecChat didn't vote, Lissa? Seems very peculiar. This. All right. Well, that's awesome. Thanks, Lissa. We finally got to vote. Sorry, we did the epic slow roll, totally on purpose. Congrats.
Yes, definitely on purpose.
Yeah.
Definitely on purpose. It was all planned. Not planned. It was all planned.
Yeah, exactly. Well, congrats to Relm and Cabbage, and of course Violet and TK. That's very impressive. And I think, like she touched on, let me just move this here. I'm gonna have to switch out around the names. I'll do that in a bit. But the 7 people receiving first place votes, I think, speaks to the level of quality and that there were many well-deserving players in this game. And we'll, of course, be talking much more about the game. But first, we want to hear from you guys. It's been us speaking, and people want to hear from you. You're the gladiators that everyone rooted for in the arena. So first up, let's hear from and just tell us a bit about yourself, which community you're from, and how you found yourself here, like your cliffs on your Mafia history. And we'll start with Aersoldorf. What's up?
Hey, thank you for having me. I played representing my home community of 10,000 Islands from the political game Nation States. Basically, when Lissa sent the invite to our community rep, they started the thread for interest, and I was tagged in that and just proceeded basically unopposed to represent my community this year. So it was a lot of fun, and hopefully I'll get another chance to do it in the future.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, hopefully you may get a chance this season. If not, I do hope you return. It's always good to see players that are returning, and as the previous seasons have shown, and this season included, there tends to be a lot of success for people making a repeat appearance in the championship. So championship experience does pay off, it seems. Glad to have you on the podcast, Aersoldorf. Next up, we have the blonde-haired Norwegian, who looks a bit like a Swede, but I've been told they look similar. All right, I'll buy that. And I prefer Norwegians to Swedes, so I'm very happy to have you here. What's up, Dizzy, as you're also called, I believe?
Yeah, I'm Dyslexicon, Dizzy from Personality Cafe. I've played Mafia since 2013, I think. I played the championship in season 4, maybe. I don't remember. I've tried to quit Mafia many times. I never made it, so I'm still playing. I think when you quit, that's how you finally win the game. But I haven't made it yet. So. Yeah. I love playing Town, love playing VT. I'm fairly often the first kill. This was no different. So yeah, happy to be the sacrificial lamb of Game 5.
Sacrificial lamb, indeed. I'm of course kidding about the Swede comment. It's because we have a couple of Swedes on staff, so I have to poke fun at them. That's the Scandinavian way to do it. Next up, we have a catgode. What's up, catgode? Nice to have you.
Hi, I'm catgode, and I'm from Congregate's Forum Games Forum, which is basically a 10-person Discord right now because it's kind of dead. But technically, we played Mafia like once or twice last year, I think, or this year. But this year, not yet. And I haven't actually played Mafia very seriously or at all before the champs, I think, like 2 years ago. I had basic understanding. Now I have a basic understanding and a few games of experience, so not much of a difference. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I play Mafia and I lose games, and and I sometimes hit stuff when I'm power roll.
That's good. Thanks for the introduction, catgode. Next up, we have my name brother, Violet. Violet, what's up?
Hi everyone, I'm Violet, and well, first I should clarify I did not hire a body double. Despite my name, I'm actually male. And I played Mafia since 2013 or something, and I played in championships a few years back. I really enjoyed it and decided to have another round. They were the best games I've played so far, so that's why I joined.
Violet, a previous finalist. Moving on to Relm. For the Relm. Come on, let me hear Twitch chat. I know you are.
For the Relm.
I'm very sad I can't hear you actually say it out there, but I'm sure we can imagine it in our head. All right, Relm.
For the Relm.
I guess we saved the best for last, at least according to Spec Chat. Tell us more about yourself, Relm, and how you found yourself playing Mafia or found yourself here in the championship.
Well, I started in around 2014 on Warlight mail threads, where you had to make a new one every phase, and they were so awful. But from that, we moved to Discord, where we would all have our own role lists, very mechanics inspired. We would play them on our own servers where if one person hosts their list, it's on their server and so on. And so we tried to combine these into one server called Hub Mafia, which was a complete failure. But you somehow found that failure and sent us an invite last year. And I tunneled day one. Let's not talk about that. But this year, nobody wanted to do it again. The conversation went like, hey, they're doing it this season again. Stewie, you want to do it? No. Seth? I'm there. Cat Juggernaut? What's Mafia for Mafia? And so I ended up getting it again.
Yeah. And again, a brilliant example of experience paying off. Always good to see that. And yeah, that's our lineup today. And we have a lot of on the agenda. We never quite get through all the stuff on the agenda, and that's okay. I want to first talk about the votes here. We can just touch on it briefly, but since we had the reveal occur live, I'm curious if any of you guys are surprised by the results, or if they seem in line with what you were expecting.
I thought it was about what I was expecting. I thought maybe Prague may have replaced one of the third or fourth and snuck in, since he did manage to stay under the radar throughout the game. But other than that, yeah, definitely the top two were what I thought they would be.
Yeah, and actually, I want to bring up a thing here because it sort of relates to this. So for those who are watching the stream, I don't know if you guys have the chat open, but what I'm showing right now is the night one guesses for alignments in this game. This is what spectator chat thought, who they thought were the wolves or the mafia members. And Cabbage is at the top. He tops the list. He was definitely the person most people thought were a wolf. So
before the game, he made a bet on his own alignment saying he would be wolf.
Yeah.
He won.
And he was wolf in my game last year as well.
So I guess Cabbage won 2 competitions in this regard. So that's just interesting to look at, considering the results and considering that Pragmatic was the one to survive at the end and not placed in top 4. But that speaks to the point of this not being an MVP-based vote. It's best player, which isn't to say that, and I can say this as someone who didn't religiously read the game, which isn't to say that Pragmatic didn't play a good game, because I honestly wouldn't be able to evaluate that fairly. He won the game, certainly, so he must have done something very well. It's also interesting to look at where the other 2 Mafia members are placed on this list, because the spec chat was quite close to actually solving the game. Solving the game would be having 8 villagers, because with 15 people, you need more than half to have solved the game and be able to just lynch the rest. And they didn't quite get there. They got 7. And because they have both Jotes in the list of people they believe in as town, that wouldn't have helped. They wouldn't have had additional information unless they were able to kill someone. So it's good performance by SpecChat. We can't always say that's the case, certainly. I think there's been one other game where SpecChat did well, and they've done horrendously in all the others. So, yeah. Shouldn't always listen to SpecChat. SpecChat has been wrong before and will be wrong again, is what we say. All right. Relm, I have to ask you, are you surprised by the votes? Speaking about the post-game results here, of course.
I thought Violet would be higher, and I felt that there were 3 or 4 players who could have snatched 4th place and just snuck in by very close margins, and it seems that's what happened with a few people.
Remind me, when did Dizzy die in this game? Was it night 1?
Night 1.
Night 1, yeah. Because there's been statistics done, and generally, night 1 and night 2 kills are actually, they do quite well compared to any other slots in the game. They actually do the best compared to all other slots in the game. Like, if you're going to die at some point in the game, you want to die to a night kill, a night 1 or night 2. But particularly night 2, it seems. And then followed by night 1. So it's just very interesting to see. Typically, night 2 is favored by the players, and night 1 is favored by the jury. And that remains to be seen. Yeah. And of course, Violet, 4th place. Are you disappointed? You can be honest here.
Well, I mean, the game did have many good players, so I didn't really expect to get that many good points. I'm a bit surprised Dizzy didn't score in the top 4, but you know, I'm not really disappointed. This was probably the hardest game I've ever played.
Yeah. No, and I mean, and like, I guess if I didn't make clear, what I meant by that is that you not even being top 4, like, I think that speaks to the quality level in this game, right? I mean, who can be upset at placing higher than Dizzy, right? Just to name one player. That's hard to be upset about, which is the compliment to both of you guys in this case, right? All right, so let's talk about the game itself. Game 5, the meme game. And let's start with the end of it. Even though only one of you guys were alive for it, I'm still actually very curious to get the others' perspectives on this. So, Milo, must if you miss Lynch and lose, I'm not sure what we're going to be calling it from now on, since for those of you who don't know, Lynch is now eliminated on Mafia Universe. I will be making a conscious effort to try to say eliminate instead of Lynch. I will not get it right at all, but I will try. It's a process. So, 4 players, 1 Mafia. Most would say that the right decision generally is to sleep, to vote previously called no Lynch or no elimination, but you didn't. And I can only ask you, Relm, why you didn't, because you're the only one who was alive at the time, but I'm curious to know whether the others agree with the decision to not go to sleep.
There are multiple aspects to it. The main one was those spec chats seem to have a very good tinfoil that Chewy was scum. We all knew in game, or at least that was the consensus, that Aersoldorf and Chewy were both lockdown core. They weren't going to get lynched, and that if we no lynched, we would have just lost one of them, and it would have just been me, Ace Miller, and Pragmatic, and I did not want to go into that. As well as I kind of had some PTSD from last year's game 10, where we lost because Batman convinced them that there was no winch when that wasn't an option in that year's setup. And going into this year, I just wanted to have another anchor going into the final vote. It didn't pan out for us, but I don't think a final 3 would have fared much better.
Yeah, because to be clear, to contextualize this, there wasn't a mechanical clear or any actual cleared person in that final 4. So it was taking a gamble that you were right on your reads and you wanted that other good town player, that town voice in the mix to help with the decision, which I can see the wisdom to. I'm curious to know whether the others here agree. Would you have done the same? Would you also just have voted that day? And would you have voted the same also?
No.
No, Dizzy.
No. Actually, I totally understand the reasoning for not sleeping. I think that is quite sound when you have a player that is not making a lot of game relevant posts. So I totally understand that. I think maybe if you did sleep there, the game could have shook out somewhat differently. You never know what happens. But I don't disagree with the reasoning. But I would have preferred to lynch Prague, actually. Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I didn't follow spec chat. So you were saying to lynch Prague.
I was the only one in spec chat saying that, actually. And everybody called me crazy.
Dizzy got the spec chat, started hard pushing Pragmatic before it became cool. And then after Violent Flip Town, everybody was like, oh, it's actually Pragma. It's them. Dizzy was right.
Well done. I'm curious to know also about so Aersoldorf. He's the one who gets night kill going into the final day. And as the players in the game, how did you react to that? Was that did you read into the night kill? Because sometimes, especially the last night kill, is maybe something to read into, or is it not because it's Y-foam?
Yeah,
I think expected.
go ahead.
Sorry, I think it was either going to be me or Chili.
Yeah.
At that point. so I wasn't surprised to die.
Yeah, so I guess the thing here there is if it's your chili, then why Aersoldorf? Like, because it is a choice, and they could have made a different choice. So do you read into the reads of Aersoldorf? Like, how does that impact the Milo there?
There was a post by Aersoldorf which made it seem like he was going to jump on Ace Mower the next day, or as I learned later, he actually over the night built up a post that broke the character limit on Discord for me being scum. So it worked out that had he lived, I probably would have gotten lynched. But because he died, and I noted that post at the time, in my head I was like, well, if he was gonna jump on Ace Miller, then this doesn't look that great for Ace Miller because they were aware that he wanted them lynched.
And the rest of you can, if you want, answer the question I asked earlier about your thoughts on Milo and whether it's the correct thing to do here. I want to add another thought to this thought experiment. I'm a big fan, personally, of Final Threes. Like, I think it's like the bread and butter of Mafia. And it's also because I come from communities where we usually play something called Cup 13er, which is a 13er setup that will often, a lot of time end in Final Threes. And it's just a very high pressure situation. It was always very fun. Like, every player would at some point in their career experience a few Final Threes. And legends could be made or broken in those situations. But what I also, from a game standpoint and from a maximizing win equity standpoint, like about Final Threes is that when someone votes you and the other person doesn't jump on the vote, then you know then and there that they are a Mafia. So you have so you suddenly have two people in the Final Three. 2 of 3 players have perfect information all of a sudden, and you can do a lot with that as the third person who's watching this unfold. Like, so you watch 2 people go at it, and I don't know, would that maybe have benefited this situation to have Adrian Miller? Also, he was inactive, so you could have given him another day, maybe hoping he got it back into the game, and had him go at it with potentially Prag, because he did vote Prag. Like, did you miss out on something there, watching that Thunderdome between those 2 players?
I think the town might have had a chance if instead of lynching Violet, we had actually been successful in getting the AS Miller wagon, just to get that distraction out of the way. Because there would have been more back and forth with everyone there at the end, instead of his, he did vote correctly, but he didn't even explain the vote other than he didn't want to vote for Relm. So then he had to vote for Prag.
Yeah. I think that makes... sorry.
I think the problem was that Ace Miller was just very quiet player. And if we had lynched him instead of me, I think we would have sparked more discussion. And with certainty that every player will be active, we would have had more security to go to Final 3. And we could have voted for no elimination in the Final 4. That's a possibility, but it didn't happen.
Yeah, it unfortunately didn't happen. And Aersoldorf brings up a good point here. We often see this mentioned in Mafia games. I've at least seen it mentioned a lot of times. I'm sure you guys have as well. Let's get out person X so he's out of the way and not a distraction for endgame. Let's get the distraction out of the way for endgame. And I'm in 2 minds for this, because 1, I think you should always just lynch the most likely suspect. I think that's generally the best way to go. But when it's a matter for activity, does it change? Because if you have someone who's not active, he's not, like, the game state isn't going to change much revolving around the player. He's certainly not going to impact the game state himself. So it's better to just give that opportunity to someone else that you would be lynching. And I don't know if you guys agree with that. Like, do you regret not lynching Adrian AS Miller earlier?
I think the only opportunity to lynch Ace Miller earlier would have been the day before with Violet. There was an entire page almost where everybody had this feeling where we all knew they were town, but we didn't want to risk it. And had we jumped on Ace Miller, as was very suggested by Aersoldorf and Violet naturally, I think it would have been a pretty good final between whether we lynch Pragma or Violet the next day.
I would have loved to have seen that. That would have been very exciting. That would have been well worth the money we use to follow these games. I'm curious, Catgode and Violet and Airsoft, to get your perspective on the AS Miller Lynch. Were you rooting for that as well on the final day from Spectre? Or what were you rooting for?
I honestly was,
Go ahead.
go first.
Yep, you go.
Okay. So basically, I was honestly genuinely hoping that what would happen in Final Four is that regardless of whether Town sleeps or not, I was kind of hoping that people would agree that Miller might be Town, he might be Ska, but honestly, he's probably just not really playing that much while being Town. And I was honestly hoping they would go for Pragma or Relm, and just accept that if they hit Town and Miller is Scam, they would just pretend the game never happened.
That's
and like this is I'm saying that kind of semi-seriously because like technically you have all of that meta stuff around the championships where technically it's about performance more than actually winning, blah 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 blah. So that's kind of an influence, but I honestly would just want to go for Realm or Pragma and just say, if Miller really is scum here, well, I don't know you guys, and just end it at that.
So that's very interesting because I do think this happens a lot, especially in endgame, especially in a high pressure game. You reach the end. Some people have said Person X is probably the Mafia, or they're inactive, they're low hanging fruit, and you're at the end of the game with the whole game on the line. Do you take the cop out lynch, so to say, the cop out elimination? Because that's just easy to do. You're not gonna receive much backlash for voting someone who didn't really post much, or do you just truly follow like your soul, your gut read on the situation? And so I admire that view. Like I would agree that you should just follow like your read, and you shouldn't ever go for the cop out. Not necessarily saying this was the case here, because if you read Pragtown, then you read Pragtown, so you should of course vote someone else. But I would always encourage that. So I agree with that perspective. How about you? I think you, Aersoldorf, were.
Yeah, if I had been in the final day, I'd already had a 3-page wall typed up to go after Realm. So I was wrong, and I don't think anything would have changed my mind.
But that
Nothing
would
they
have
could
been
have
fun.
said. Nothing they could have said would have changed my mind.
You changed your mind on, what was it, day 5?
The day 5 switch at the end, when it was you and Violet going back and forth, I think I wanted to try and survive another night. When it came down to me and Chili, what I was trying to do was make you see me as less of a threat so that you wouldn't kill me first, and that I would have a chance to be in that Final Four. And unfortunately, I wasn't playing to the right person.
That's very interesting information. Man, imagine if you'd gone against the Realm. Oh, you would have had the wrath of SpecChat to deal with.
Post would have been legendary.
That would have been entertaining to watch.
Just like SpecChat needs someone to praise, SpecChat also needs an enemy. So
yeah, exactly.
He was. He took up the position of the people.
Well, I think I already was the enemy of the spec chat, at least at some point.
Yeah, for a decent while, yeah.
Related.
Yeah.
Or sorry, did you?
When it comes to AS Miller's Lynch on the last day, I did support that, but I would have hoped a bit more discussion on Prag as well.
Yeah.
Because of course, from Realm's perspective, it's either Ace Miller or Prag. But since Ace Miller wasn't defending himself, of course, the discussion was not steered enough to other players that way. So.
Yeah. So actually, I have a question here. did this thought ever occur? And I'm not sure this is a good thought, but I can imagine this thought playing a role. A.S. Miller is not active, and if he was the last Mafia, shouldn't he feel more of a responsibility to step it up for his team? He's been placed in this situation. Like if he, as Mafia, he would know that. I think a lot of players would feel more of a responsibility in that case to not at least go inactive, because that way you're just making it a sure thing that you're going to be targeted. I don't know, Relm, did that occur to you, or did you just think it's role neutral?
Yeah, it did, and I think that's generally something to keep in mind. But I believe that as somebody who work posted for my first half year on the site, if I had been in Ace Miller's position as Mafia going into where the votes got placed, I got confused because I thought votes were locked at Milo, and so I told everyone going in, we got to do it one by one, least scummy to most scummy, and so that ended with 2 votes locked on Ace Miller, with Chili saying that if Ace Miller doesn't show up, he's going to vote me. Ace Miller gets a vote on me, it's immediately 50-50. Now I found out that it wasn't actually locked, and that when I woke up, I was going to push Prague more, but game kind of ended.
Yeah. All right. So relating to A.S. Miller and activity, do you guys think? What do you guys think about the importance of activity on MU or actually on 2+2? There's a sort by post count thought, a theory that has been implemented sometimes, which is those who are posting a lot are probably town, and those who are not are probably Mafia who didn't want to be Mafia. Do you subscribe to that theory? Do you lynch? Should you lynch inactives, and when should you lynch? And how do you approach that, and what are your thoughts on the matter?
Activity is completely useless. Just hit minimum post count and vote randomly and go away.
Yeah. So catgode is not a fan of the theory. What the rest of you think?
If you go in with the mindset of we got to lynch the low posters or eliminate them or whatever word we're using now, I've always found that to be a much easier game for Mafia, because if a Mafia is one of those low posters, they're fine with bussing them. If, say, you have what I think we had very early on, around 3 or 4 low hanging fruit, and G said was kind of bordering because he was pushed a lot. Had we gone in with the mindset of massacre that group, I think we would have gotten absolutely thrashed.
I'm not a fan of that theory either. And for example, in this game, Kapaj was one of the top posters in the game, so it wouldn't have even worked here. And I think it's always more important to look into the content of the posts. And if there are low posters, see how other people react to those low posters, or how those low posters react when they are being pushed.
Yeah. I don't know if you have anything to add, Dizzy or Aersoldorf.
I was one of the low posters for the first day just because of getting the start date wrong. I felt that pressure a little bit, but so I made a conscious effort to try and come out stronger on day 2. But yeah, it's easy for a Mafia to hide as a low poster, but at the same time, it can also make them stand out more. It just depends on the flow of each individual game.
Yeah. So as a Mafia member, there's pros and cons to it, right? Because a lot of the time, what happens, especially in I don't know if you notice this yourselves in your communities, in newbie games, when a community plays a game for the first time, the Mafia almost always win. Like seriously. Like it's 90% of the time they win, and that's because when people play this game for the first time, someone points a finger at someone and they're wrong, and then they lynch the person who pointed a finger, and then they lynch the person who pointed a finger at that person, and it's just all townies going after each other while the mafia just hide amongst them. That's usually how the first game goes in communities. Of course, players with more experience know not to do that. But as a low poster, because this wasn't even the question, but it's an interesting thing you bring up, Aersoldorf, is you can also maybe just let the active posters go after each other and try to hide. And sometimes the low posters are indeed town, as we saw here. But I have to agree with you guys. I of course just bring it up as a interesting discussion point, but especially in a championships setting where you don't even have meta, and the information you do have is that a lot of these communities just have way less active games than MU does. I would say maybe all communities except 2+2 has less active games than MU does. So like you can't judge it based off of that. And especially not if it ever should become meta. It's problematic because then you know as a mafia what you have to do to clear yourself, right? It's an easy task. But of course, by having to post a lot, you also potentially are more likely to reveal yourself. So there's also that to consider. But I definitely don't agree that it's as simple as that. But do you lynch? One of the reasons I also ask this question is because the difficulty of bringing inactive posters to the end of the game. Like if you have those posters in the 10 to 20 range, which is enough activity to not get subbed out, and it's fine activity. But if you have a lot of other players all posting 50 or more times, they might look at that as not giving enough information or contributing enough to the game. Do you think that's a distraction? Do you think that's, or how do you deal with that? How do you deal with lower posters?
They are so different though. Like some low posters can post no content, and some can post like actual content and tells when they are in fact there.
Yeah, like in this game we had Miller and we also had Chili, and they had a 10 positive. And like Chili was someone I was honestly would be surprised. I mean, not surprised. I mean, I would be glad to see Chili in top 4, and Miller was, well, he voted pragmatic last day, but Miller had slightly less content. So, you know, you can just look at the numbers and stuff.
Yeah. No, I think it's possible to read low posters like Aersoldorf in day 1. Actually, I remember both me, Violet, and Relm read Aersoldorf as Gut Town just from like coming into the thread, saying like, oh shit, the game has started. Like, yeah, so.
Actually, an interesting thing here that I just found myself thinking is that, so the question is, do you guys agree with this? Is it maybe sometimes in some regards easier when you have someone who doesn't have a lot of posts to read them, because you can more easily ISO them and get a complete picture of their game? So like, because otherwise to examine one's progression on a certain read and they have 300 posts, that's very difficult to do and you can't do it reliably. But if you have someone who's made 20 posts or between 10 to 20 posts, you can very easily get a sense of their whole game and the progression. And it gets easier to get a full picture and actually evaluating that. And you also, another benefit is that you don't maybe get false positives. And I have experienced this sometimes myself, which is I'm a tone reader. So what that means is one little thing in one big post, the way one sentence was phrased is something that I can look at and go, that person's town. And I don't care about anything else. I don't care about the votes. I don't care about anything else. It's just based on my experience or my beliefs or whatever. I believe that thing is definitely towny. But if you have someone who's made 300 posts, maybe they just randomly stumble upon what I believe is a towny sentence, and that can mess you up because there's so many posts that you eventually get false positives. So I don't know if what are your thoughts on that, on the merits of actually, or is it if it's easier in some ways to read someone who's maybe just medium active or instead of very active? And did you experience those difficulties yourself in evaluating someone with a lot of posts?
Well, I can definitely agree with that. And I did struggle in the finals 2 years back when there were people posting 200 to 400 posts per day, I think, and I just had no ability to keep up with that.
Yeah.
And I got overwhelmed and mislynched. But in this game, I think the post restriction to 150 posts did intimidate people a bit. I think it played out well for me. I could follow each person a bit better. I did still fail with my reads quite well, but at least I had reads this time.
Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, if you look at the end, you've got 2 low posters at the end. Pragmatic was a low poster for most of the game. He even posted on day 1 and day 2 that he wasn't going to be around much. So you've got Pragmatic on one side and A.S. Miller on the other side, and pretty much everyone read both of them the wrong way. So it's not always easy to look at a low poster and read them right.
But you also had Chili, who was almost as low of a poster, yet everyone town cored him. Same with you. You didn't have too many posts going into day 3 or 4, yet everyone town cored you. And I think that has to do with content and mindset, because Pragmatic came into the thread without any drive to really do anything, which ticked people off the wrong way. Ace Miller, and Mother Hen, they didn't do anything pretty much. They were no point. Whereas you and Chili, you both came into the thread, you had a mindset to solve without an agenda, and that led people to easily gut read you down, even if we couldn't trust you for a long time because you didn't have as many posts to go off of.
But see, I think that's based on content, where me and Chili at least had some, effort behind our post that we did make. Pragmatic, he had a little bit of content to his, but A.S. Miller basically just showed up and said, I just got home from work, I'm getting ready to go to work, and then maybe cast a post. There was nothing to read content-wise with AS, and so I think that at the end is probably why it went the way it went.
Yeah, I should say I tried to get a quote from A.S. Miller, but he was at work, unfortunately, so I couldn't get a quote.
Well, we knew.
I think the way we should read Miller is that we should look at the hours when he's posting and make sure that he's going to work regularly and not just using this as a Mafia excuse.
We call his work.
But on a more serious note, like Soldorf and Chili were like they had plenty of actual genuine analysis in their posts, and I also don't think that, and so that's one thing, they actually had like a lot of actual good solving in their posts, despite them not really being that many of. And one other thing I don't really agree with is how Soldorf kind of points out how Pragmatic and Miller, they were similar in being low posters, but we read them both wrongly. But I think the bigger issue of Pragmatic is that people didn't actually pay enough attention to what they actually posted. I think there was a bit too much of a focus on associations and people just thinking they wouldn't do that stuff between each other because there was some kind of pushing between, and I think the problem wasn't in reading Pragmat's content, but rather in reading into these associations too much without paying too much of a mind to the content. So I think that was the main problem of Pragma there, and not just reading them wrongly based on their post counts.
That's one of my greatest pet peeves in Mafia is associative reads. At least how they're usually employed by people. I'm not a very big fan of. Actually, this brings up
the best associative reads are day one, when you just go day one and say that this guy's scam and like half the thread is down on his scam and stuff. But we're gonna lynch the low poster anyway, because why not?
I have a related question, and it's very related, but there's a nuanced difference. So I think we all agree that it's quantity or quality, and you can't just look at the amount of posts. But can you look at effort as a tell, or do you look at how a person acts or behaves when solving the game. So
Oh.
the way someone solves game versus putting in the effort to solving the game. So let's say we have someone who only makes 15 posts, but those 15 posts are like there's a lot of effort behind them. There's a lot of analytical thought behind them. They reread someone's all their games on another site, and they compared notes, and they whatever. Like they did a lot of analysis, vote count analysis, etc. Do you give a lot of town points for such work, or do you give no town points for such work? For people like putting in effort.
Well, in championships games, I expect people to give effort regardless of their roles. But for example, when Relm used Google Translate to translate my Finnish games and try to read me that way, I did stop for a bit and think, is this what a wolf would actually do? And that was one of the reasons why I, on that day, decided to move to Ace Miller road, because I was getting a bit hesitant on Realm already.
Well, let me ask you then, Relm, would you have done that as a Mafia?
Say no.
I probably not. There was a point similar in, can't remember if it was day 1 or day 2. I think it was day 1 where Aersoldorf came into the game, and they immediately went to town on me specifically. And everybody at the time generally thought I was pretty towny, and so for that to latch onto that read felt like it had no agenda to it, and that it wasn't in collusion with anything going on, which made me feel much better about Aersoldorf. But yeah, the Google Translate, that was a bit of tunnel vision, and I probably wouldn't have gone that far as Moth, because I think Violet would have been lynched that day either way.
Again, this makes me think of another question that I actually want to ask you guys, and I want to ask you, Relm, whether you think that was a valuable use of time to go and read someone else's games, and even having to go to the bother of translating. Because I did this a lot in my championship games. So this is a championship setting. So can meta even be used? And especially when you don't have close knowledge of the meta. Like there's a definite difference between me playing 10 games with you, Relm, and then me not having played with you and reading those 10 games without me being in them and without me experiencing them real time and interacting with you and seeing how you respond to certain things when I say them in the way that I do. I think there's a definite difference between those two. So you can't use meta in the same way, and you can't predict how someone will act in a new setting, which championship games certainly are. It's a new setting. So the question is it even a valuable use of time? Because I used it with some success, but that was because it was back in season 1 where the people playing, a lot of them were from the same side as me. So it's not the same at all that I went to rate the games. But compared to other things that you can spend your time on, what do the rest of you think? Do you think would you recommend a new player to go and read someone's games on their home site, or would you recommend them do something else with their time?
When I read Violet's game, I was really looking for one main thing, and that was Violet did a lot of defending GZW, in like day 2 especially, and I was looking to see how they treated their scum partner, and the post I quoted was that was one of their like half dozen posts of the whole game, and it was them hard defending them in the same way they did GZW. So that's what I kind of went in there looking for. But Dis did everybody's meta day 1. It was actually kind of insane.
Me?
Yeah, you did everyone's meta day 1.
I did. Well,
how useful was that?
Well, I just can't help myself. I'm just so curious. Like, I just want to see how everybody plays. And I think like if I didn't do that, like I would post like 300 posts anyway. Like,
if you didn't do that, you might have actually had a chance to live to day 2, probably.
Yeah.
That's true. That is true. Well, I also want to say something about like lynching low posters, because I had kind of the opposite problem, if you will, that I was very, very confused. about both Kapash and GCW, but they were both so involved day one. So I was like, okay, I want to give them a pass, because if they are scum, which they very well could be, then I think they're spewing a lot, which they were, in my opinion. But it turned out to be kind of a mistake as well. So. But I mean, just for enjoyment, I'd rather play with people that are actively involved and post a lot. So
yeah, I mean that's often said when giving someone a day one pass. There's I guess there's two benefits to it, right? One is if they're a wolf, they're gonna spew, and if they're a villager, well, it's good to have them around for a bit longer because they're actually active and putting in effort. So you can appreciate that for sure. Hopefully, right? It's not everyone's effort that you can always appreciate, but that's another discussion.
Yeah, but what I got out of like looking into people's games was Jamiet, poor Jamiet, who played a very important role of Red Herring in this game. He had in his Scum games said something verbatim that he did this game as well, which tilted me so much. Yeah.
And I mean, I like that's what I might want to ask isn't that the danger of doing these rereads is that you latch onto something and you can't get it out of your head and just influence your reads and like and I know you're a good player because I've also seen you in past games. Is that maybe just get out that white noise and just focus on their actual post in this game?
Well, we were wrong both times, so.
Yeah, so I don't know. It's I'm just playing devil's advocate here, of course. I don't know if you, Aersoldorf, or you, Violet, have any thoughts on doing meta in a championship setting? Going to the... yeah, go ahead.
Well, I don't really find it that useful to read old games because championships is a very different setting for many communities. For example, Relm and Kapash had played together before. I think experience like that would have been helpful. Or if you know the other person have played many times, you know their general style. But just looking at some games in isolation and then trying to review how they would act in the championship setting, I don't find that the best use of time.
And I agree. I think if for like for me and a lot of other players, you're playing with a group of people that you've never played with before in a setting you've never played in before. So even my meta from back home, I'm the most frequent poster regardless of role, but I could barely keep up here. So my own meta was destroyed.
That's a good point. So I think that's very valuable for people to hear out there.
Also, I think that a problem with meta is that, well, on one hand, usually you either want to read someone that has a lot of posts, and in that case, you already have plenty of stuff to read them on. And if someone is low posting, then you'd go to check their previous games, and in 9 cases out of 10, they post even less on their home side or whatever, so you don't really get much out of that. And also, I think I personally really dislike meta reads. People like to just read games and they find like 3 or 4 games and think that it really helps them. But I feel like you have to really play for a long time with someone to really see some specific threads that link the games, and it's not something you can really spot well in like 3 or 4 games or whatever, and not if you're reading this very fast because, oh my god, the end day is in 3 hours and I have to place a vote and make a decision, and like that's a lot of material that doesn't really help you that much. If you want to do meta reads, I think if you really have to, you shouldn't kind of go out to read up someone's meta if you don't really have experience in that. You know, rereading a past game you played with someone is okay, but if you're just seeing a random person and thinking I'm gonna meta read them, give me their games, I don't think it's really gonna help you at all, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that a lot of the way. Just playing it cool in chat says I hate meta reads. Jagged Jimmy J says I hate meta reads that correctly interpret my meta. Yeah, we all hate those. Meta reads is actually a very controversial subject. A lot of people where I originate from, my home communities, are totally fine with meta reads. I know on some communities it's almost like banned to do meta reads. So we have both extremes. I'm pretty fine with them, but I can see why some people dislike them because it's not. I can see why some people don't feel it's fun to defend yourself against that. Like you're playing in the game and you just want to play that game. Why do I have to defend how I am acting compared to another game? Like I'm happier today. What can I say? Like I can see why that might not be fun, right? It can detract from the fun of the game, and it is a game, so it should be fun, right? But it's also a game about solving, so I see why people use it. And I would say so to wrap this portion up, I would say in a championship setting, I would generally not advise doing meta reads, like going to the effort of going to someone's site and reading their games, because I don't think it's generally worth your time. And if you do, I would be careful about latching onto details, and I would only use it to get a general sense of someone. So because this is my example of where I think it can be beneficial is if you have someone who is very inactive or very passive, rather. Let's say someone who's very passive, because there could be many reasons for inactivity. But if you have someone who's actually following the game, it seems, but they're very passive, I think it might be valuable to go to the site. And if you find out, well, they're usually the vocal leader, so why are they so passive here? Like, why are they not at least complaining about not being able to? Because we do sometimes have the leaders who come and they can't keep up with the activity, so they're annoyed by that. That is something that happens. So you can't necessarily read someone for not being a leading voice, because it's difficult to be a leading voice if you can't keep up with the activity. But if you can sense that like the personality isn't the same, then there might be some value to it. That's just my thoughts on the matter. Another controversial subject is, and this was brought up by Dizzy as a topic, and I love this topic. I can't believe that I haven't thought of it myself. Day one is the best day of Mafia. Fight me, Dizzy says. And I agree 1000%. So while you guys prepare your answers, I want to hear you guys' thoughts on this. I'll just say my own thoughts on this very briefly. I think day one is definitely the best day, because at that moment, everything is open. Like there's a whole complete adventure still to go on. No one is cleared, which is boring. You can still read everyone, and there aren't excuses, and there aren't any distractions. So I just love it, and that's also partly because I love making reads or faking if I'm Mafia. And later on, like the solving is held by mechanics, and I don't find that as fulfilling. It's still fun to win games and use that information. Of course, I'm going to use the information, but it's not as fun. It's not as fun to win a game based on mechanics as it is to win a game based on your reads. So what are you guys' thoughts?
I disagree.
Yeah.
Well, it might be, some of you might have noticed that I'm a bit analytical player. So I don't really enjoy the randomness of the first day, but only after the first night kill, I feel like I can start to properly analyze what has happened in retrospect. So maybe that's just my personal play style. And sometimes I do enjoy the memes and all the other randomness that goes on. But the real deal for me starts with analytics, and that starts from that day two.
I've always found day 3 to be the best, because my games tend to go day 1 you either winch Mafia, then you miss winch day 2, or you miss winch both days. And day 3 is the one where you really start to get a feeling for, okay, maybe we can read into the night kills, maybe we can read into the wagons, maybe we can just generally read individual people really well with some content. Day 1, it's definitely the funnest though. Gotta say that.
Well,
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, an important thing to ask here is that are we talking about day one being the best in terms of helping to solve the game, or are we talking about it being the best as the day that you're actually playing?
Oh,
Because, well, I hate day one then. Because there's nothing to really latch onto. But yeah, I personally prefer to have some concrete information and see how people play around that personally. And I also just people tend to read based of the most stupid stuff they want, and I know it's just people come up with some random garbage, and you have to sift through all that and just it's not fun to me. Day one is always kind of like pre-game for me, and just hope you don't get uh, wagoned for something stupid. That's my opinion. But I think like day one can be useful later in the game once you have a flip or two and you can look at stuff or just look at how wagons worked, who jumped where. But I don't think like on its own merits, it's really that good. But again, it depends on the player because Dizzy seems to have a really good intuition in terms of Mafia, and you know, for him it's probably easier to play that. I don't really have intuition. I have negative intuition, and I just can't handle day ones personally. So I disagree with it. Um, we can talk later when and how we fight.
yeah.
Yeah, DM me
I will. Yeah.
after.
It's very interesting. I'm very happy that we actually have differing views on this. I also think that's part of the fun. So that's part of also the fun of day one for me is that you have so many personalities and all the personalities are still in the game. It's just a wide open game. So when I was answering the question, it was definitely about whether it's fun. As to which day is most valuable, I think that's more complicated to answer. And you don't want to hear from me anyway, so I'll just leave it at that and I can write an article on it at some point. Dizzy also brought up another interesting thing, which is Relm and Violet's Thelma and Louise moment. I don't know if you want to set the stage, Dizzy, and then we can hear from the main actors in this movie.
Well, it went kind of like Relm and Violet talking, as they do, and decided to, hey, should we both be lynched? Should we just like have a collective suicide moment here? So yeah, that was Thelma and Louise in that blue car, just like
driving off the cliff.
And it was beautiful. It was beautiful. I want to quickly touch on why I think day one is the best for me. One reason for that is because I think I've died night one in half my town games, at least. So I often just have day one, so that's all I know how to play. And I also like chaos. I like gathering information. I like trying to talk to everyone and just like, and I really think that day one is the day that the Mafia is the most unconscious about what they do. They also don't have anything to latch onto, and that can really show later on. Yeah.
That's
so
a good.
You can, if you bring a lot of, I think I played kind of a flat game this game. I tend to be more chaotic than I was this game, kind of because it was champ. So I wanted to like try to be an easy town read, but I kind of regretted it halfway into day one because I was like, this needs more chaos, because I think then it's easier to read back because Scum can get very unsure about what to do with chaos.
We have Okusan in the chat saying "Coo!"
Oh yes.
And he says, "Day one, just pick 3 random players and call it a day. And go home." Yeah. I understand bird language. That's why I understood that. To add on to what you said, Dizzy, that's another thing I like about day one is that there are no power dynamics established in the game. So there isn't already a leader. There isn't already a town core. So no one's on the outs yet. It's on everyone still to prove themselves in one way or another. And I also like that because even the best of players aren't necessarily in the town core right away, and it can, for me, it can be very frustrating if I feel like I'm not being listened to, or if I'm being accused. Most people generally don't like being accused. Some are better dealing with it than others, but a few people actually enjoy it. And I like that about day one. Like everyone still likes each other, and it's a complete reset, and everyone has a shot. And that's why I also am a proponent of resetting the game later on, because what you also don't have on day one is assumptions, and you don't have a locked-in PoE, and it's just frustrating to look at when like a mafia snuck into the town core and no one's ever reevaluating, and they are just navigating smoothly through the game. Whereas if you reset the game, then you can maybe shake that up. I want to talk about, and I don't know much about this, so I also depend on you guys to give me the cliffs, or give us the cliffs. The topic is reversal, and it's the GC slip and day 5, and also how the slip was possibly salvageable. I don't know if you guys want to set the stage for this and talk about it.
Oh wait, what about the Thelma and Louise moment?
Yeah, I guess we walked away from that. Yeah, no, let's. You guys can think of. Yeah, you guys can think about this question while Relm and Violet talks about the Thelma Louise moment. Take it away, Relm.
Okay, so going into day 6 after the cabbage flip, I was tunneling Violet. I did his ISO as well as the other 2 in the PoE, and I came to the conclusion he defended GZW way too much. And I figured if he came into the thread going at me, I would do something for the sole reason of trying to make Spec Chat enjoy it. And apparently they really, really loved it. And that was me going up to Violet and saying, okay, so if you think it's me and I think it's you, and we're 95% sure about our reads on this, how about we just lock it to us 2 right here, right now, just to see what his reaction would be? But he knew what I was doing, and that made it all pointless.
Yeah, like it was really tragic from the town core duo after TK's push to the Thelma and Louise moment, where we both set up each other as the future lynches and think we made a good deal.
Also, I just disagree so much with that. Like, if I'm town, I'm never gonna pretend even to agree to be mislynched. That's just not. No.
I mean, suicide pacts are fun as long as you're playing a mash, because a mash is. I mean, I'm speaking from experience, and then someone else night killed the guy I was thinking about anyway. But yeah, in a normal game, there's not really much of a place for that because you have a very limited, pool of players and mislynches. Yeah. So you should just fight and reevaluate. Sometimes also, this is the most important word: reevaluate, whatever that is. Think again about stuff. Even when you're tunneling. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Suicide pacts are fun.
Yeah, I mean, what happened? How did the town core got flipped upside down? And you were so close yet so far. Like, what happened, guys?
Okay, the day 1 wagons, it was Jamiet and GZW, and Cappage literally saved GZW last second. So it was Scum saving a partner. And as time went on and the jokes revealed themselves, TK came in swinging, and he looked back and found that, well, there's only 3 people on the Jamiet wagon who ended up saving GZW. Me, Violet, and Cappage. And so that ended up with us having the idea that, okay, well, 2 of us are probably Scum within these 3. And so that, with that idea being the commonplace, if you're in those 3, you're going to say the other 2 are Scum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a shame.
Yeah,
that was yeah.
Well, that's basically it. I mean, TK also made a very strong push on Realm, and at the point I totally bought it because I believed in the associative read with GCE.
So, I mean, looking at that, because I mean, looking from the outside, and it's easy to say this after the fact. Like, I understand in games, like you think about patterns and you think about what makes sense and you think about what you've seen before, but there's nothing like a town could have voted Jamie there. Like, there's it didn't say in any town role PMs that you couldn't vote Jamie. Like, it just happens sometimes that people vote for certain people under certain situations, and you know at least one town who did it. I mean, why do you read so much into that? Like, how do you find yourselves believing that so much?
Because the way Cabbage did it was like a direct save, and Cabbage knew his only way out of being eventually lynched was to try and get me lynched first.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess what I'm also trying to say is, like, I think people assume too much or expect too much of the mafia, and they expect them to have way more plans and motivations behind what they do than they actually do. Like, and I'm sure you can all agree to this. When you play mafia, a lot of time you just go with the flow. I mean, you don't have time to make a grand plan before making a post. You just go in and post, and well, you already suspected person A, and you cleared person B, so you can't vote person B. So sometimes you're just trapped by your own previous posts. So there are just certain situations that you can't make happen. Like, you can't necessarily just jump on someone, and maybe you're not even around for the end of discussion. So sometimes you just AFK and you weren't around, or you disagree with making the save because you think you look too suspicious. No, a lot of mafia would think that, right? So it's just it's peculiar to me that one would read so much into it. But I say that as someone who's very anti-voting analysis, by the way. So
yeah, well, I don't think it was all based on the wagons of the first day. I think it was me protecting GCE for at least 20 times in that game, and Realm having the very confident town where she butchered 3 townies in row. And
but like, yeah,
Worthy sacrifices.
yeah. I mean, I get it. Like, you see Cabbage doing it, so why couldn't someone else do it? I mean, in general, I would like when someone really hard defends a mafia, the average player is almost for sure town. I guess in a championship setting, it's different, right? Because you're playing for all the marbles and you have a higher level of caliber. But I would definitely say in an average game, when someone really hard defends a mafia person, in my experience, they're town, who just doesn't know anything and is very uninformed.
Yeah, I remember Violet saying day one after GCW posted a read list. Violet said, "Okay, but if he's scum and putting in this effort, he deserves to win."
Yeah.
And I thought, like, they are never scum together. So,
Yeah.
so like, Violet is never scum here after G flipped. So I was very sad about that lynch.
Yeah, I think this game's kind of a case study in paranoia. I don't know if others share the same sentiment with me, but like at a certain point, I feel like at least half the game kind of locked in this idea that this town core is compromised, or maybe it doesn't even exist, and we just have to get rid of the townies players because they're probably deep. And like, we had this wagons day one that where we had like the top townies on Jamie, including Cap. Well, he wasn't top townie. That's why I kept calling it internally core instead of town core, because I considered Cap the core of the game with his posting, despite him not being very townie. But like, we had the core players on Jamie, and we had all those players kind of having weird dances over GC in different ways. Then TK comes up with that massive push on Realm. I'm pretty sure Realm was also paranoid after a certain game they played recently with the same setup. And at some point everyone just started thinking that like Realm or Violet or someone there has to be scum. And I think that was a big driving force behind a bunch of stuff that happened later on. everyone just got paranoid and looked everywhere. But I, I don't know. I feel like Cap was incredibly obvious in hindsight, and I just every time I go through his posts and I see stuff, and I'm like, why did nobody push him? Why did I not push him? I don't know. But yeah, I think paranoia just ate down this game mostly. And that is a big factor here. If everyone's just scared of the core, and it kind of completely tore the game apart for Town.
We went into day 4 thinking, okay, Jotes are going to reveal we're going to have a strong town core. We got none of that.
Yeah. So
yeah, and then we got GC slipping, and then we lynch him, and people are like, well, Relm was defending GC, and Violet was defending GC, and Cap actually saved GC day 1 and others, and so we technically got a flip, but it didn't really help that much, honestly.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was scary.
It's very interesting because there was a good town core. So I guess this interestingly, yesterday we had the game 6 discussion, and I asked like, how does this game go differently? Can it go wrong? And I guess the game 5 is an example of how it can go wrong, like how a certain set of circumstances can happen to make the town core dissolve and be paranoid of each other. So I guess it's interesting to compare those two games. And relating to what you talked about, because I want to talk about especially actually the serial killer elimination, because he basically gave up and offered himself on a plate. What were your reactions to that? Like, did none of you think that was potentially Towny, or did you think, is that just Y-foam in your minds?
Go ahead.
Well, at that time, I was still protecting GCE like the 20th time in a row. And then I didn't believe that serial killer was a wolf either. So I kind of just started doing associative reads and tried to help in whatever ways possible and prepare for the next day. Because we had somehow, for some reason, locked the lynches to the serial killer and GCE. And I just wanted to go against Cabbage that day.
When I came into the day thinking oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I had started day 2 with my wall post about the 3C theory based on the end of day 1 vote switches at the very end. So, I did have CK in that group, even though I felt a little stronger about Capage. I was fine with staying on CK that day, and I kind of wish I had done differently. But part of what led me to mistrust Relm for most of the game was how hard that Relm had attacked Capage on almost every single day. But until the day that we actually lynched Capage, Relm never finished the day with their vote on Cap. So, they talk about Violet was defending GCE. I felt that Relm was pointing out everything that was scummy about Cap and still doing nothing with it with their vote. And so I thought that was more of a soft defense than an obvious defense. And it cost me reading everything else correctly, I think.
And when I went into day 3, I believe CK was the scummiest player in the game, Cabbage at number 2. And when it came to CK, I already wanted to lynch them, and then they said, I give up, go ahead and lynch me. And at that point, from my home community, whenever somebody says that, it's immediately, that's a policy lynch. You hate to see it. But when somebody says, go ahead and lynch me, I've fallen for that gambit too many times to let it happen again.
Yeah, and I mean, if the person actually surrenders, I guess there's not much to do because they're just out. But as I believe it, he said that he didn't want to be a distraction anymore. Isn't that part of what he said?
Part of it, yeah.
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 But do the rest of you agree that that's just a policy lynch? Dizzy disagrees.
No, I don't.
Disagrees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Mafia is a very emotionally taxing game, or it can be, which is why we're all addicted to it. And these things happen, and usually town explodes more than scum do in that way, or explode. That's the wrong word to use, but they give up. So yeah, I would just try to take the town clear from people being emotionally exhausted. Yeah.
We have TK in the chat joining us. So hello, TK. He says, I just want to mention that I actually did say that. Could someone who defends GCDEW as much as Violet actually be a wolf buddy? So good read there, TK.
With that, I do need to dip out now. But
yeah, that's
that's
fair. We're also nearing the end here. Let's just say goodbye to Aersoldorf first. Thanks for joining us on the podcast. It was a pleasure.
Goodbye.
See ya.
Fine.
All right, just gotta switch up the names. All right, so guys, we're gonna be wrapping this up within 5 minutes. Anyone following in Twitch chat, if you have any questions here as we near the end, feel very free to ask them. And I'm just gonna gotta switch all the names very quickly.
Gotta ram the game.
All right, and yeah, all right. And the only one who doesn't have a name tag is Relm, but everyone knows Relm. Relm, the spec chat favorite for the Relm. All right, he's the one without a name. All right, so as we are nearing the end here, I want to ask all you guys, what was your favorite moment of the game? And anyone can take it.
Well, I know my favorite moment. It was not the suicide pact, but it was Ace Miller's wheel. When TK suggested that Ace Miller could just throw dice, Ace Miller comes and corrects that he actually uses the wheel to determine who to lynch. That was so much of a comedy gold. I didn't know. I just kind of got stuck with it, and I brought it up all the time, and I still do. I can't help myself anymore. I praise the wheel myself.
The wheel. It's too powerful.
It is. He voted Prague. It is powerful.
It is powerful.
It works.
Why did we not listen?
We were afraid.
You're afraid.
What about the rest of you? Any favorite moments from the game?
Mine would probably have to be like the last page of leading up to Cabbage's lynch. And that's probably my favorite moment in all of my playing Mafia, because I worked so hard defending myself that day. To just see Chili and Aersoldorf jump on the Cabbage wagon, do what it ran, I knew immediately I was going to end up Spec Chat's favorite. I did not know I was already Spec Chat's favorite at that point by about 2,000 posts. But that, I was just so happy. I shouted yes and threw my hands up when I saw that.
Yeah, Chile and Soldorf had the ability to make their own decisions, not burdened by the thread, and that's one of the most important skills you have to possess to be good at Mafia. An honorable mention in terms of favorite posts goes to Miller voting pragmatic, of course, but my favorite moment was, of course, GC slipping, because I think that was the only moment where I had some sort of a genuine big impact on the game. And I also was, well, the thing is, I made a post that was kind of hinting in hindsight that I protected TK. And then GC made a post that's very that kind of felt like it was jumping to an assumption there, to a conclusion. So I asked him, why would he assume that? And I was honestly just expecting him to say that, well, you made post this and this, and I just assumed. and that you protected him, but instead said you got me and self-voted him, and then the game completely went the other direction. So that was interesting, very fun. I think that was the only Pro Town thing that happened thanks to me this game. So I'm also glad of that.
I was really happy with our jokes this game.
Yeah, they were good. I think my favorite part, well, all of day one, but also spec chat, because that's where I was at most of the time. and also feeling very vindicated when Prague was in fact scum, and almost all of spec chat had disagreed about that. Yes, that felt good. Feeling righteous about stuff.
Now that we have you here, Dizzy,
Yeah.
let me just find it. Jim asks, or Jay and Juliet asks, Dizzy, will you marry me?
Aw, I will marry you both. Yes.
Is that allowed in
Let's do
Norway?
it. Yeah, sure.
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 Awesome. Just Playing It Cool asks, Relm, how long did it take you to do your vanity search?
I woke up around 12, got to the computer at 12:30, accidentally posted as if the game was still going on because I didn't see the ending. Realized that my mistake, joined spec chat at around, I want to say 12:45, and I finished sometime around 7 to 8 p.m.
For the realm.
So long. When I had around 100 in there from last year's game, where I wasn't really that remarkable. And then this game I joined, and they're like, Quaz is like, you probably have the longest vanity search in Champ's history. And I look at it, and it's 4,296 posts.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
For the realm.
It was 3,000, and then they did Realm Hour, where they just made an hour an entire hour.
By the way, catgode, I'm not allowing you to say that, and TK isn't either. He's saying that's not true, catgode, unless you count saving me as not in favor for town thing.
Well, I mean, just a part of the GC slip, so it's just kind of grandfathered in. And speaking of Jax, also a shout out to Cap, who actually correctly identified me and TK very early on. And the only reason we lived so long is because he was overruled in scam chat, I believe. And a kill was made as someone else. Had Cap gotten his way, this game would look, well, GC probably wouldn't slip, at least. And I think that alone would make the game look a lot different. Would make it different, yeah.
Indeed. All right, well, guys, several of us are Europeans. I think we all are except Relm, if I'm not mistaken. So it's very late for us, so we better be going to bed. I just want to say thank you to all of you for joining me here on the podcast. It was a pleasure. Thank you for playing in the championship, not least. That requires a lot more effort than just appearing on the podcast, so that's very appreciated. I know it's a lot of fun for me. I know it's a lot of fun for everyone watching. And speaking of those watching, thank you to you as well. We will be returning next Sunday with another podcast. Looking forward to that. Please do follow the channel, by the way, so you get notifications. So especially if you're a Twitch user, when I pop up, you will see it. And I'm just going to be, besides these podcasts, I can reveal now. I don't think I've said this on a podcast, but I do plan on continuing these podcasts after the Mafia Championship. Won't necessarily be on a weekly basis, but it will be when I feel like there are interesting subjects to bring up and interesting guests to have on. I also do hope to get Dmitry Davidov on at some point. I did bring him on for a thing on Mafia Universe already, so hopefully he's open to also appearing on the podcast. That would be very awesome. So now we can have people volunteering to be on that podcast with the man himself. This is the man who created Mafia, by the way, to those who don't know, Dmitry Davidov. Yeah, thank you for joining me. Thank you for watching, and good night.